There, I wanted to put together a quick little presentation to discuss a few quick items related to writing a literature review. This is by no means comprehensive, but should get you started. This is in the context of writing sociological literature reviews, so it might be different if you're looking at something in a different field. The expectations will probably differ from what you're going to see here. Um, so let's get started. When you do a literature review, what you're doing is you're reviewing the status of research within a given field. And so, uh, what you have to do is find studies on a particular topic that you can review. And that's kind of the whole point of it, right? So, I have a browser opened here, and I have started off by looking for a source using Google Scholar. And you can see here my take on Google Scholar. It's a very broad database, meaning it covers a whole bunch of fields, so not just the one you're interested in studying. Uh, that has its advantages and its disadvantages. It means if you were to search for a key term, you're going to get stuff, maybe you're looking for sociology resources, but you might wind up getting chemistry resources. So you get just a really broad set of items returned when you do a search. Um, if you're on campus here, then Google Scholar will connect to your local library resources and give you direct access so that you can view the sources that you identify through your searches on Google Scholar. All right, so that's a nice benefit. If you're not on campus, you can still access sources, but they have to be open access. Um, so let's start there. Like I said, I have found an article. I'm looking up research on carbon emissions from a sociological standpoint, and for me, that's a pretty broad perspective, social science in general. So you can see I found a source here re-examining the impact of foreign direct investment on carbon emissions. Does per capita GDP matter? So kind of a standard political economic approach to studying carbon emissions. And I've clicked that, and it's opened up here, and it's a really great thing when you come into uh, an HTML article with links to each section of the article. That's extremely convenient. A link to download the PDF so you can view it offline. Just the ideal sort of thing. It doesn't always happen. So sometimes you'll find a source that you don't have immediate access to, but the open access ones are the most delightful ones because they're so easy to read and open. All right, so that's what we've got here. And since we're looking at literature reviews, why don't we just look at the literature review that's in this article? And that's the first thing I want to point out is when you're doing a literature review, one of the best things you can do is read other people's literature reviews. So if I really wanted to understand the status of the research on this topic, well, the authors have already kind of provided that for me, right? So they've got a literature review here, so we can start reading it. The exploration of the theoretical mechanisms of the relationship between FDI, that's foreign direct investment, and environmental quality has been the focus of scholarly attention. Initially, Walter Ingo et al. Proposed the pollution haven hypothesis in 1979. So there, that's linked. And the beauty of this is if I were to click that, I could go right to the back of the document and see that source. Uh, it doesn't always work out quite that conveniently. Sometimes you actually have to just go down to the references and look up the author names, Walter and Ugello, which if you clicked on references, you could go do that. And so you can see if you just read through literature review, you get a sense of what the key theories are, the key studies that have been done, the key findings that authors have found. And it doesn't, we're not going to put all of our confidence in one study, but usually when you have a peer-reviewed journal article, the quality of the literature reviews is very good. They tend to be fairly focused on the topic at hand, and that's also helpful. So one of the best ways to find sources for a particular topic then is not to just keep using a search database, but to find at least one recent article on the topic of your interest, and then referring to their literature review to identify additional sources. And if we go down to the references, you can see there's loads and loads of articles. Typically a literature review for a peer-reviewed journal article will cite anywhere between 50 and maybe 75 articles. So you're not going to have a hard time finding sources if you can just find one and it has a literature review. If it doesn't have a literature review, it's probably not a peer-reviewed research article, which means you shouldn't be including it in your literature review. And the beauty of this particular format is you see you've got links here to this. You can look directly at the article by clicking right here or there, or you can go to Google Scholar, get more information about it. So let's say we wanted to look up this one by Bacchus et al., Economic Growth, CO2 Emissions, Renewable Waste, and FDI Relation in Pakistan. New evidence from 3SLS. Okay, so Journal of Environmental Management, issue 196, page 627 to 32. If I click that, voila, I'm looking at the article. And once again, I got lucky. This thing is open access, or I've got access to it through my library. And yeah, I can keep going this way because, this is a nicely formatted article. The introduction here has some more literature review, some additional literature review to follow that, and then more sources. So you can see you can just kind of use this kind of snowballing technique, and before you know it, you'll have hundreds and hundreds of sources, more than you'll know what to do with. So I always chuckle when people say, I can't find more than one or two sources. I'm like, well, then you're not looking very hard because the one or two sources you've found probably have somewhere between 50 to 75 sources each. Now, at my institution, SUNY Oneonta, we have a library website, and from there we can identify additional databases. Let's say we want to look for something more specifically within a field. I'm going to click on S because I kind of know where I'm going. I'm in sociology or social science. I like that one. Social science full text, Social Index. Some of you will have access to something called Social Abstracts, which I like. Social Index is pretty comprehensive of sociological journals. So, let's say I want to look at carbon emissions there. You see it suggests some other modifying keywords that will maybe limit your results. I am interested in climate change, so I can just keep looking. I'll search there. And then you get a bunch of results. And you can narrow those down by year. So let's say I'm only interested in the last 10 years or so, maybe 5 or 6. And I only want peer-reviewed. I can limit it to full text, but I don't really want to do that, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And I can do things like limit it to English language. A lot of things get automatically translated these days, so that may not be necessary. But you can see I've found 144 articles dealing with the topic. All right, so then I can just kind of read through these, and some of these I have links to HTML, full text, or PDF, and some of them they don't have a link. All right, so well, I got lucky. Most of these do. Let's see if I can find an example of where we don't have such easy access. I'll click to the next page here. Let's see. If I click this, I think this might be an example of where I'm not going to have access. So um, sometimes what you'll be able to do is have a direct link to something called interlibrary loan. And it's another way in which to find articles when you don't have the convenience of a direct link. I mean, more and more things are open access, which means it's easy to direct link to your sources when you find them. But occasionally you'll run into a paywall or something, and you'll have to find another technique. You shouldn't be getting out your credit card. If you are a student or a professor at a university, you probably have access to interlibrary loan, and that's the best way. It's your trump card for finding sources that you can't get through an HTML link or a PDF link. And so, back to my library. Let's see if I can show you. This is just, at my institution. Interlibrary loan is a link, and I can log in. Iliad is the system most people use, most institutions, and I can make a request here. I can receive requests and so forth. So you'll have to maybe talk to your librarian to figure out how to navigate interlibrary loan, but you should be able to find every single article on Earth, except for really obscure things. Maybe they're in limited run. You can't find even a digital copy. But even interlibrary loan will send you print copies as well at times. So don't rule that out. It might take longer. So that's how we find things. But really, my advice is really read the literature reviews. Once you find a really relevant source, go to its literature review and then look at the back of that article to mine it for additional sources. All right, you'll never run out of the more sources. So writing a literature review, uh, my preference as a sociologist, I know, kind of betraying my field, there is an American Sociological Association style, and I do use it sometimes, but it's not as widely used as APA style, American Psychological Association, and it's only subtly different. But really, what it does is it gives you some guidance on how to format your paper, how you cite different sources within the text itself, and then how you cite them at the end of the article of the paper you're writing. Okay, so let's go back to the article we had earlier. And I'm gonna actually use a different one, so I'm gonna click on a PDF. Demographic perspective and research on global environmental change. Okay, so this is a article that's going to deal with our topic of climate change and carbon emissions. Let's say I want to identify an article or access an article. You see, even in this PDF, there are hot links to the sources. Let's say I want to look up this article by Lutz et al. From 2014. Uh, I can click on that, and sometimes I'll get lucky and I'll go directly to a full text article. And in this case, I was fortunate and I got there. And sometimes you can even find a link to a PDF so you can download it and save it offline, which is pretty handy. And sometimes you don't get so lucky. Uh, the clunky way is just to copy something like the title and bring it over to Google Scholar. Okay, so I have a link to Google Scholar in my favorites bar here, so because I use it a lot. And I'll just paste the title in there, and voila, it came up. You can see I have a link here to a PDF. And so within a couple of clicks, I'm on to the next source that I found at the back of an article originally, right? And guess what? This one's probably got a literature review as well. So you kind of get my drift. You can keep going ad infinitum, digging deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole of locating sources. But usually what you find is as you narrow in on a topic, you'll see a lot of redundancy. You'll see the same sources showing up in the reference sections again and again. And there's a reason for that, and that's because other people are doing the same thing you are, right? They're looking up sources and identifying sources by reading the back of the articles when they're doing lit reviews. So that's the key. That's how you find things. But let's go back to the question of style guides and so forth. And I'm going to go back to, let's see, this article we had open earlier. And I can see this one is similar to APA. APA, at the back of the article, will have the author's last names and their first initials. And then they'll have the year of the publication. Usually that's in parentheses in APA, so this style is slightly different. And much like APA, you'll have the title of the article like this with first word capitalized. And also if there's a subtitle, the first word of that is capitalized, but the rest of it is not capitalized. And then the journal, so that's the title of the article, this is the title of the journal. is italicized, and that is capitalized. And then in APA, there's usually a comma after that. And then there's the volume number of the journal, and then the issue number. And usually that's separated by commas with the APA style, and then the page numbers of the article. And this convention goes back to print journals. Not all articles have that format because increasingly they're just online. They don't have a print version. So some journals are ditching that kind of convention of having volumes and issues and page numbers, and they're going just to direct links. So you'll still see this digital object identifier, and sometimes you won't see this part at all, right? You'll just see the DOI and a link to the article. So that's how you format things at the back of the article. Within the text, usually when you cite an article, you'll see like right here, there's a comment. So the consequences of global warming on human health and well-being are already being felt. And this article by Watts et al. Speaks to that. So they've cited Watts and Watts's colleagues. And sometimes when you have more than three authors, you'll abbreviate it with et al., which is short for et alum, which means everybody else basically involved on the study. And then a comma when you're using APA style, and then the year of the study, right? And then if we want, we can click and see that at the back. So there's the Watts et al. And there's the et al. Is now expanded out to see the authors. And this one has about 5 or 6 authors on it. So, and they actually abbreviate it there because there's even more. So sometimes you have, especially in medical journals, they'll have 10 or 15 authors sometimes. It's less common in sociology to have more than 4. Uh, so, that's sort of how you cite things at the back of articles and how you cite things within the text. This one's slightly different than APA, but very similar. So that's how we cite things, right? So that's really what you need in terms of how to format. So then just writing it is a matter of taking notes, going through the articles you find, jotting down ideas, finding more articles, highlighting a few key ideas, and then sitting down and writing it. And, you know, literature reviews tend to be pretty densely written. Now you see this kind of style where you'll have a subheading. I think good lit reviews tend to have themes in them. So, like this is a sub theme of this particular literature review is how environmental change affects human populations. And so part of that discussion is the effect on human health, which this article by Watts et al. Discusses. And then you read on and you get to some other subtopics. So the unprecedented weather shocks are attributable to the increase in global average temperature included by the accumulation of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, and all these studies talk about that. The change in climate affects the human population, for example, through changes in livelihoods, agricultural production, economic conditions, health, and well-being. So this IPCC report, and so this is a little different because that's an agency report instead of an author. Let's get cited a little differently. That's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And one thing you'll notice is you don't see a lot of direct quotes here. One of the big mistakes people make when they write their first literature review is putting in a whole bunch of direct quotes. And really what you want to do is just paraphrase. You want to just find a few key ideas from every article, paraphrase those key points or findings. And sometimes more than one article will support the same finding with evidence, so you cite more than one article at once. That's also an indicator of a good lit review that tends to be more integrated, right? And this is a longer one. Here's another sub-theme: mediating factors underlying the relationship between population and environment. So you read on here and you find out about that. And this one, longer than usual, honestly. This is a pretty long lit review, but sometimes you'll see a lit review that's only 1 or 2 pages. They do vary in length, and even a short lit review might cite 30 or 40 articles, right? Because they're so densely written. You could see like here's one sentence, and then behind it there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 articles being cited, right? So you don't have to focus deeply on any individual study. You're just kind of pulling out the key findings which tend to overlap between studies, right? So it's a different kind of writing. It's not like a typical research paper you write in high school when you really go into depth on each individual source. So that's something to keep in mind when you're writing a lit review. So those are just a few key points I wanted to make. Good luck with your literature reviews and take care.